Hello and welcome to another update. In this one, I'll be covering the Bakhmut and Zaporizhzhia fronts, so make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. But starting out, we see here in the Bakhmut front that we have now reached a stalemate. And I say that because we are now in a situation where the Russian forces have not advanced in the past few days. Latest advance was the 1st of May estimates, as I'm not exactly sure when the front moves, just an estimate, as there's a delay because of tactical reasons. But essentially, 1st of May was the last time I reported an advance by the Russian forces, and there's been no advance. The front line hasn't changed ever since. So why is this? What has happened and what is currently going on? So essentially, there are two reasons for this. The first one is that the current fighting is occurring in specific areas, like the Olympic School, the post office, the last defensive line in the Ukrainian forces, the Children's Hospital, the Citadel area. And then we have, here in the south, we have the fortified positions here to the southwest of the city. So essentially, the Russians have now reached very fortified areas of the Ukrainian forces. And at the same time, the Ukrainian forces recently received an order that the limit on their ammunition usage, especially for the artillery, has been lifted. So this means that Ukraine now has the ability to fire as much as they want. At the same time, we have this whole ammunition saga with Prigozhin. So without going too much into it in detail, I'll just give us a quick summary, and then there will be a detailed video on my Patreon. But essentially, what we see is that the Russian forces have, or the Wagner forces specifically, have first increased in size from 10,000 to 50,000. So they 5 times increased in size. And in that time, let me show you in a graph. So this is Wagner forces, the amount of Wagner forces there is, and the amount of ammunition they need. Then we have a secondary graph, which is the amount of ammunition supplied and the amount of ammunition they need. So if we start out with the amount of Wagner forces, so we start out with 10,000 and it goes up to 50,000. Then we have the amount of ammunition they need that goes to match that. Then we see the amount of ammunition needed, which will be this direction, the x-axis, and the amount of ammunition supplied, the s-axis, the y-axis. So they had the amount they needed at the start, 10,000 soldiers, 10,000 ammunition. Then it increased and increased and increased. However, the ammunition followed slowly. And then in one go, they suddenly got a lot more. That is because he started complaining in the Soledar area already. But something interesting is that there's also the underground tunnels in Soledar and Pereskulivka, where they can store a lot of ammunition. So they started storing there, but then eventually that depleted because they started needing more in Bakhmut because of how heavily fortified the city is. So they kept spending more and then they needed more. So essentially the amount they were spending increased to the point that it overwhelmed the amount they were supplied. So they started going into what they had supplied. And then that wasn't enough due to the fact that the Ukrainians now have lifted their limit. That means the Wagner forces need to increase the amount that they use again, but they're already going into their supply. So essentially he needs even more. Now there's been a video last night where he complained that they're only receiving 30% of what they need. That is most likely because they suddenly need a lot more, and at the same time they were already doing a deficit. So maybe they were receiving 80% of what they needed, which is still easy enough for them to continue their fighting, especially since the Ukrainians had their own limit. But now they are receiving 30%, which means that the amount they were receiving has significantly decreased, or the amount they need has significantly increased. So that is most likely the reason. So with this, we can determine that the Wagner soldiers have reached a stalemate, and that is because the Ukrainian forces most likely match the amount of artillery shells they use. And why do I say match? That is because the positions of the Wagner forces is in already demolished areas. That means that the Ukrainian forces need significantly less ammunition to hit the Wagner forces compared to what the Wagner forces have to use to hit the Ukrainian forces. Because we can see most of these areas are high-rise buildings, which require a lot of ammunition to hit, especially if they are within the basements, if they are in the educational areas, and so on. So the Ukrainian forces have fortified areas, while the Wagner forces do not, which means that the Wagner forces need significantly more for the same effect. And at the same time, we see that the Wagner forces significantly outnumber the Ukrainian forces because of the sheer area that they have compared to the Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainian forces are now spread around about 2.6 square kilometers, while the Russian forces are spread around 60 square kilometers or so, or something around that amount, which means that the Wagner forces have significantly more units as well that they need to supply. So in that sense, although they have a small percentage of what they need, it's most likely around the same as what the Ukrainians have. So the Ukrainians just need to match the Wagner forces, while the Wagner forces need to significantly outmatch the Ukrainian forces. So it is actually a very big problem for Prigozhin if this is accurate. This could also always be the possibility that this is one huge acting career for Prigozhin. Maybe he wants to be a common actor after the war. Who knows? But most likely, since it has continued since Soledar now, so that's 3 to 4 months now of complaining. So most likely there is some truth to it. And in the end, anything he can do to increase the supply for Wagner forces would be better for them, regardless of how much they need, so that they could fill up these underground storage areas in Soledar and Pereskovivka, but also here in Bakhmut. So that is the supply situation explained. Then we move on to the Zaporizhzhia area, where according to Syriac maps, in the past few days, since the limit was lifted, the Ukrainian forces have started significantly increasing the amount of artillery shells that goes across in Zaporizhzhia. So this is not at the level of which you'd expect from an upcoming offensive. It is still lower than that, but there has been a significant increase. So let's do a graph again. So if we say this is the amount of ammunition that they need to shoot for the offensive, and then there's a cap right here. That is, when they reach that cap and surpass it, then an offensive is most likely coming. And this is how much they're actually shooting. So, boom, boom, boom. They are somewhere beneath this cap, and then they just continuously shoot this amount. And then as soon as it goes above, then we can start expecting an offensive being prepared and launched on the Zaporizhzhia front. So most likely this is not going to be the only area in which they launch the offensive. They're most likely going to couple it with something else, similar to the Kherson area. They started launching in Kherson, and at the same time they launched in Kharkiv, and then they finally took Kherson because of what happened in Kharkiv. So most likely the Ukrainian forces are looking to do the same here, where they'll launch multiple areas so that those two can help each other achieve at least one of their goals. Well, that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.